I'm Mary Calvi, coming to you from Liberty Island as we commemorate 250 years of America's independence. This milestone marks 2.5 centuries since the founding fathers signed the Declaration of Independence on July 4th. Throughout the next hour, we will take you to places that will allow you to step back in time.
It's incredible when you think what took place in this room.
Yes, this is the room where it happened.
We will introduce you to little-known history hidden in our backyard.
I don't know if they realize where it came from or how important it was for these men to basically sacrifice their lives and their freedoms.
And bring you the events that have had a major impact on our country. And one of them happens this weekend with celebrations of the 4th. Nothing is more iconic than the fireworks displays. The spectacular shows are something Americans can find every year as we celebrate America's birthday. But what made fireworks and the 4th of July synonymous? Because of this, founding father John Adams, as seen in this letter from 1776, envisioned pomp parades and illuminations across the continent for Independence Day. And grand fireworks displays have continued ever since that very first official anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. And Aziza Schuler spoke with the New York family who has helped make the holiday sparkle for decades.
When America has a marquee moment to celebrate, odds are the Grucci family is illuminating it.
There's nothing more Americana than fireworks. We're the only industry, I believe, that's gotten a presidential mandate. So here we are doing our job for America.
This 4th of July, doing that job means 350 pyrotechnicians handling 60 shows in a single day, including collaborating for the main event on the Hudson River.
It'll be the biggest 4th of July by far yet, absolutely.
That's saying a lot for a family that won the World Fireworks Championship in Monte Carlo in 1979, earning the title as the first family of fireworks. Since then, the Gruccis have lit up 8 presidential inaugurations, fired from the tip of the Washington Monument, and that's barely scratching the surface. 14 Guinness World Records.
Yes, the criteria is when you have your competition say to you, how the heck did you do that? Then you know it's worth doing it. That's the thrill. Right?
It's the Grucci, though.
That's the Grucci. I'm going to coin that if you don't mind.
For about the first 70 years, fireworks by Grucci were made right here in Bellport. But in 1983, an explosion in their factory killed Phil's father and cousin, changing the company and their family forever.
If it weren't for the strength of the family and our employees at the time, we would never have survived that.
It took us a decade to rebound from that. But the pendulum swung in 2 directions in 1983. In May of '83, we did the Brooklyn Bridge, which became the hallmark by which other fireworks shows started to be gauged against, including our own.
Then came one of the most breathtaking nights in New York City history, the Statue of Liberty Centennial covered by CBS News in 1986.
To know that we brought this trade with us, this talent with us from Italy, through New York, past the Statue of Liberty, onto Ellis Island, and then into the heartlands of America. It was very, very rewarding.
The Gruccis say it takes 2 things to pull off a magnificent fireworks show: the eye of an artist painting a picture and the precision of a military engineer designing explosives. What started in 1850 is now 6 generations deep. Phil's son Chris is carrying the torch and setting the stage for the big 250. How do you want people to feel?
Something like this is really important, as a nation, just to remind everyone, we're all in this together.
We want people to feel proud, we're celebrating freedom.
And did you know the first victory in America's fight for independence happened right here in New York? Those 250 years ago, the revolution came to Harlem, and Harlem won. The Battle of Harlem Heights is considered the first victory in America's fight for independence. And its geography may have played a factor. By the battlefield site stands the Morris Jumel Mansion, which had become a military headquarters for General George Washington, sitting atop the second highest point in Manhattan. They could certainly see the British coming from there. From these windows, he could see.
Well, from the front of the house.
Yeah.
He would have gone to the front of the house to look for that. He could see, you can see the river from that window right now. Mm-hmm. He also would have been able to see on the west side all the way to the Hudson.
And while it wasn't considered the greatest of victories, the Battle of Harlem Heights proved the British Army was not invincible. And now we shine the light on other history that's all around us, places you may walk by every day. One of them, Federal Hall in Lower Manhattan, considered the birthplace of our nation. On these grounds in Manhattan was the meeting place of the first United States Congress. And for that, on the balcony upon this stone, George Washington took the oath of office as the first president in 1789. And at New York Historical, the Bible that Washington placed his hand upon is preserved for all to see.
Can I ask you, it's pretty large.
It is, and it's a good thing Washington was a sturdy guy.
New York City back in the 1700s was the capital of our nation until the year 1800, when the federal government officially moved to Washington, D.C. And nothing is more connected to the founding of our nation than the Declaration of Independence. And as Carolyn Gossoff reports, for one man, his lifelong quest for his family lineage revealed his bloodline runs through our nation's founding.
2 centuries after America's story began, Keith Taylor went searching for his own. A search that brought the Suffolk County Undersheriff face to face with one of the few surviving original printings of the Declaration of Independence. What are your emotions standing here?
Awe and humility and pride. To have a small, personal, familial relationship with that signing.
It's a search that began when Taylor was a child. He became obsessed with where he came from. His rudimentary family tree would evolve into this one.
5 years ago, I don't think they would have been able to have created the DNA proof.
He now has scientific evidence that his own family history is American history.
James Taylor came over in the 1600s to Southern Virginia.
From England, establishing a family line that would later include James Madison, President Zachary Taylor, and Revolutionary War patriots. Which brings us back to the Declaration of Independence and one of its signers, John Penn, also in the Taylor family tree.
It really speaks to what it means to be an American. America is an idea. It's not a race, an ethnicity, a religion, a class, or a caste system. We are all Americans.
He's traveled to historic sites researching his Taylor ancestors.
A lot of these books are not available, out of print.
Uncovering not only proud moments, but also pain and contradiction.
They traded bodies for land. And that is an unfortunate aspect of the early part of this country's history.
But somewhere along that same family line in North Carolina, an enslaved woman gave birth to Keith Taylor's great-great-grandfather, who was freed at birth by his white father. Like America itself, his family history contains both pain and possibility.
America has grown as a country. It has expanded its definition of what it means to be an American, and that is the beauty, I think, the strength of this country.
250 years after the Declaration proclaimed that all men are created equal, Keith Taylor found that promise inside his own family history.
Truly an American story.
This rare printing can be seen at South Street Seaport through August. And another major event just days after the signing may have changed the course of history. It's one of the mysteries of the war, the Great Fire of 1776. Was it an accident or sabotage? Just days after the British Army took control of New York City during the American Revolution, flames burned a fifth of Manhattan to the ground. An exhibit at the Fire Museum of New York shows how the flames spread quickly and with a fierce intensity along Broadway. So was it the American forces who set the fire? Witnesses at the time say yes.
Many of them saw people cutting the handles off of fire buckets or actually starting fires.
The British hoped that a decisive victory in New York would end the rebellion, as they called it, but the fire changed those plans. It deprived the British of their headquarters, their naval base, and slowed their steady movement, helping the American side go on to win the revolution. It took the Patriots 8 years to win the war, and for the very last meeting of the commanders, they gathered in New York City. And the room where it happened is inside Francis Tavern Museum in Manhattan. Here, General George Washington made his farewell address to the troops who survived the war. The event was filled with food and drink and an emotionally charged speech.
I most devoutly wish that your latter days may be as prosperous and happy as your former ones have been glorious and honorable. He's really asking them to treat him as an equal, to break down some of these power structures and engage as friends.
Still today, visitors can enter the room where it happened. And you wonder, how did it happen? Our side had no large organized army. Our soldiers were mostly farmers. We had no navy versus the massive military force of Great Britain, which at the time ruled what is now the United States. But our side had the resolve to seek freedom from British control. And one artifact discovered deep underground at the World Trade Center site offers a glimpse into the resilience of the American side.
An excavation at the World Trade Center site revealed a historic gem, the remains of a gunboat used during the Revolution. The oxygen-poor soil helped preserve the remnants. Now, 16 years after the discovery, the boat has been reconstructed like a puzzle with its 1,200 pieces and no roadmap to do it. How high would this boat have gone?
So the top of the boat would have been just beyond this piece that you see here. This it's called a stern post.
It's one of only 2 gunboats that have been recovered from 1776, and this is the oldest of the 2.
It's very rare to have these ships and to actually find them, and then, of course, to be able to preserve them and have it on display.
Stay with us as we continue to celebrate America's legacy of 250 years.
Still ahead, from her historic torch to her famous face, we take you inside the Statue of Liberty Museum and...
Does this ever get old? No, it never gets old. I want to go out all the time.
Fun on the water. This boat might be nearly a century old, but it's played a big role in protecting our city. Plus, it was the musical that inspired a generation. How Hamilton is still creating memories and showing how the stories of 250 years ago are just as relevant today.
Lady Liberty, a symbol of freedom as immigrants arrived in America. She was the first sight they saw. And here inside the museum is the original torch. The statue was a gift from the French and dedicated in 1886. She stands tall at 305 feet and entirely made of copper. Her crown has 25 windows and 7 rays. The statue's current torch was installed in 1986, a copper flame gilded in 24-karat gold. It's a symbol of enlightenment, its lights shining the path to freedom and liberty. Also here in the museum, you'll see a model of the famous face. What's really interesting is it's not very thick, as thin as about 2 copper pennies. There's another face who led America to freedom, but she is hardly known. Her name is Margaret Corbin, and she was a hero in the Battle of Fort Washington in present-day Washington Heights. She was on the battlefield assisting her soldier husband in loading a cannon. He was shot and killed. She kept going. She was hit by enemy fire and nearly lost her arm. And that's not all.
And then she's a prisoner of war. So after Fort Washington capitulated, she was a prisoner along with the 2,700 other people that were defending the fort and captured by the British.
She later became the first woman to ever receive a military pension for her service. And Margaret Corbin was held as a prisoner in the waters off Brooklyn. Dick Brennan is in Wallabitt Bay. And Dick, those prisoner ships were dangerous and deadly?
Indeed, Mary, dangerous and deadly. The victims of a war that lasted for years, with many battles being fought right in our backyards.
The Battle of Brooklyn, or Long Island as it was known, did not last long, just a week, but soon the Continental Army was on the run, desperately trying to escape the British by crossing the Gowanus Creek and marsh. Called in to hold the line and save the escape, the Maryland Regiment near the old stone house in Park Slope.
The fighting was very fierce here around the house.
And they took great casualties.
They did, 256 killed or missing.
They were outgunned and outnumbered, but didn't back down.
Because the Marylanders were able to keep this escape route open, the American Army was able to get behind the lines at Brooklyn Heights.
But time would be running out again. Soon the Redcoats had the Continental Army surrounded in the Heights. George Washington decided on an audacious strategy, evacuate an entire army across the river to Manhattan overnight. As the clock ran out and the sun was coming up, an incredible stroke of luck, literally the fog of war.
This fog settled across the East River. The weather conditions really helped for that to make the escape possible.
Some 9,000 men made it across the river, a great escape for Washington, but hundreds were taken prisoner during the battle, and the British had nowhere to put them. Their solution? Floating prisons, hell ships as they were known.
It's hard to overstate the misery aboard these prison ships. First-hand accounts we have describe the stench, they describe ticks and lice, they describe just basically as abject conditions as you can imagine.
Most were in the area where the Brooklyn Navy Yard sits today. Overcrowding and disease, including smallpox, killed some 11,500 people, more than those killed in the entire Revolutionary War.
Prisoners were kept below deck on these ships in the middle of the river for 7 years.
And then there was little respect for the dead. Bodies were dumped in the water, and bones would wash up for years to come.
Sometimes they were thrown overboard, sometimes they were buried in very shallow graves in that marshy water. And so for years after the war, some of those remains would resurface and wash up on the shores of Wallabout Bay.
In 1908, the prison ship Martyrs Monument was built, now the centerpiece of a beautiful park, but still a symbol of an awful forgotten history.
The war would rage on for 7 years. The British finally left New York in 1783, but the legacy of brutality remained. Mary?
Thanks, Dick. And just 50 years ago, America celebrated its bicentennial in 1976. The spirit of 76 was its theme and even was celebrated in advertisements at the time. Concerts and interfaith services also took place on the waters around New York. Operation Sail, or Op Sail, brought a fleet of hundreds of international ships from 30 countries to New York Harbor. 6 million spectators gathered along the shoreline to watch. There's a similar event this year to mark America's 250th. The largest flotilla of tall ships from around the world will sail into the port of New York and New Jersey. That includes an old fireboat that was part of the 1976 event. John Elliott got on board.
This is one of the few really important working boats that still works. I mean, it's a 95-year-old vessel built by the city of New York in Brooklyn. It was the longest serving fireboat in the history of the city of New York. It's the first modern fireboat in the history of the United States. We used to know how to build this stuff. I mean, not just for the day, but for forever and ever.
So this really stands for something?
It stands for a lot. I mean, it stands for a lot for the city, it stands a lot for the country.
Welcome to the belly of this beautiful beast. So these are the propulsion motors. There's 2 of them, both of them connected to a 6-foot propeller. I mean, this is basically a 3,000 horsepower power plant. You've got 5 engines, 5 generators, and 4 pumps. These can pump 18,000 gallons of water a minute.
Fireboats are great because they rush in, they deal with an emergency, but then if you have Queen Elizabeth coming into harbor for the first time, or the Normandy coming into harbor for the first time, what do? You send out the fastest boat that you have, John J. Harvey, and do a water display. So it's this wonderful kind of combination of a real working boat dealing with emergencies and a boat that celebrates New York and the harbor.
So it's a life-saving party boat.
After decades of service with the FDNY, the boat was saved from the scrapyard by Huntley Gill and Chase Wells. Now a team of volunteers inspires the future by preserving the past.
We do a lot of maintenance, a lot of work, but it's a lot of fun.
And if we take you, no matter how old you are, out to the Statue of Liberty and shoot water, it turns you into a 6-year-old.
It's not just steel and rivets. It's a group of people who've made it all come together, and people from all different political backgrounds, all different social backgrounds, cultural backgrounds are all here. If you come on the boat on any of the volunteer days, it's a rainbow.
Does this ever get old?
No, it never gets old. I want to go out all the time, and I do.
And stay with us. We have a lot more to celebrate after this.
Often Washington would talk about how this was something that had to be done for future generations.
Bringing history to life for 50 years. Meet the man who's turned his passion into an important lesson. Plus, we'll introduce you to the covert spy ring, so secret, their identities were even kept from General George Washington.
250 years ago in America's fight for independence, our army appeared near collapse. That was until 10 crucial days. The winter campaign in New Jersey that reversed the tide of war. It began with the Continental Army crossing an icy Delaware River in darkness into New Jersey, Christmas night, 1776. This was followed by significant victories at the battles of Trenton and Princeton over the next 10 days.
In a week and a half, the Continental Army with Washington at its command manages to undo a year and a half of setbacks and totally flips the war upside down.
It was those 10 crucial days in New Jersey that historians believe may have made the difference between victory and defeat. To this day, many mark the pivotal moment in American history. Steve Overmeyer met with one man who's been participating in a reenactment of the crossing of the Delaware for 50 years to find out what motivates him to keep coming back.
My name's Ronald Rinaldi II. I don't pretend to be Washington. I think he's such a great man. More than just a teacher, I feel like a historian, somebody who can bring living history to the students. I like to impress them with what Washington looked like, the uniforms that they wore back then. I hope to raise lots of questions.
Dr. Rinaldi is executive director at the Center School in Somerset, New Jersey.
I'm here today because I want to read a book to you.
Today he's telling a story and fielding questions.
Yes.
Did you get that costume off of Amazon?
The answer is neither, because this isn't just a costume. Every Christmas, he brings one of America's most famous moments back to life by actually crossing the Delaware.
When I'm crossing the Delaware every Christmas, we get to the middle of the river. The noises on the sides dissipate, and it's just the oarsmen and the oars hitting the water. There's moments where you're almost transported back. It gives you such a sense of awe.
He first joined the reenactment of the crossing in 1976. He was just 14, and he was supposed to just stay on the shore. But something unexpected happened.
I can remember just like it happened yesterday. I see this George Washington walking by me with his entourage of generals, and he stopped and he looked down at me, and he says, "Come on with me."
He went on the boat that year and came back the next year and the next. For 50 years, he has been reenacting this crossing. He's a living reminder of what happens when you make room for someone.
You were a teenager when you were invited into that boat.
Yes.
And invited into history.
Yes.
Why is it important for you to make sure that they're invited as well?
My students tell me it's enjoyable because I get to bring it to life, let them touch the wool uniform, make it living. It's a wool coat, it's wool and leather boots, yep. And that's a lion's head. That's the type of sword that Washington carried.
The eyes and the nose?
Yeah, see that? I feel very honored to be able to do that and to pass it on to the younger generation. I'm going to talk to you today as George Washington.
You've been doing it 50 years.
Yeah, don't remind me.
What does it feel like when somebody reminds you that it has been 50 years?
It's weird because I look over the years. If you said 50 years ago, you'll be doing this in 50 years, I'd be like, yeah, right. It's not real. You know, my sons go, how long are you going to be doing this? I said, I don't know, maybe 60, maybe 70, maybe I'll do 100. We'll see what happens, as long as I can walk.
And now you see why he keeps coming back, not just to relive history, but to place it in someone else's hands.
I love when people like to bring stories and actual true stories, and they bring it to life.
Maybe the most important crossing after all these years isn't happening on the Delaware River. It's happening here, where history is crossing generations.
We have much more to come on the 4th of July celebrations right here on our Tri-State 250, our legacy of liberty. I need to know, how many times have you been inside the Statue of Liberty?
Literally hundreds.
Hundreds.
Yes.
He took his first steps on Liberty Island. Hear from a man who grew up in the shadow of the statue. And it's a first and only of its kind. Why 75 tons of metal was stretched across the Hudson. Plus, meet the band that has been playing America's soundtrack for the last 250 years.
America means peace.
It's where I grew up, where I was born. It's the country I love and where I plan to be the rest of my life.
It's my home. It's where my family's from.
America means freedom.
America is the ultimate melting pot. We all have different backgrounds and different traditions, and it's beautiful.
Welcome back. I'm Mary Calvi. We've got so much history to dive into as we celebrate America's 250th birthday with stories of bravery,
The element of surprise was absolutely essential to this battle.
secret spies, and some revolutionary spirits.
We wanted to think of a creative and really multi-sensory way to allow people to be transported into history.
And how the stories of 250 years ago are still shaping the kids of today.
It was honestly like one of the best things I've ever seen.
We're here on Liberty Island, the statue, the first sight millions of immigrants saw as they reached New York Harbor. There's so much history around this location. I joined someone who knows as much about this island as almost anyone else. Captain Hamilton Clancy, I need to know, how many times have you been inside the Statue of Liberty?
Literally hundreds.
Hundreds.
Yes, that's correct.
So your grandfather was in charge here on the island?
That's
and
right.
lived here?
Yes, my grandfather lived here, and my father-to-be was the captain of the ferry boat.
How about that? And then a generation later, you became captain.
Kind of by accident. I wanted to get my captain's license to basically honor my dad, and ended up coming to work here for the ferry company again.
Tell me the feeling of seeing tourists and immigrants come to this island and seeing the Statue of Liberty.
It's been a very rewarding experience because I had the opportunity to see many tourists come out here, millions of tourists over the decades that I've been around here, actually come to the island and look up and see this view that we're looking at here. And even better, to go inside, climb up to the top of the pedestal, or better yet, up to the crown.
America celebrated Lady Liberty's centennial in 1986, and CBS was there as President Ronald Reagan flipped the switch and turned on the lights. The celebration marked a years-long effort to restore the statue after a century of wear and tear. Liberty Weekend was broadcast to 1.5 billion people in 51 countries. The waters around the tri-state area played a pivotal role in our history. 250 years ago, the Hudson River was considered key to the continent. During the American Revolution, the Americans desperately wanted to stop the British from taking control of it. So much so, commanders ordered the Great Hudson Chain to be constructed. 75 tons of metal stretching across the water. A map from the time shows the links across the river. In fact, 2 chains went across with the belief that the British Navy ships that tried to run them would be destroyed.
On display at Washington's headquarters in Newburgh are the actual chain links that sat atop giant logs to keep them afloat.
There would have been more than 100 of these things, 15 feet long, a foot in diameter. It would have been a truly, truly impressive river defense.
From high above, you can see how mammoth a project this was. Nothing like the West Point chain had ever been constructed before, and never would be again.
At the same time, a secret project was underway between Long Island and Connecticut, filled with covert operations and spies.
The Culper spying truly turned the tide of the American Revolution.
From learning plans of British Army movements to discovering traitors, the Culper spy ring, made up of everyday folks on Long Island, used forms of espionage to inform the Americans, including invisible ink. With wax and a quill, I gave spy work a try at Three Village Historic Society Museum in East Setauket.
They would have used wax and then had a reagent to apply.
The little bit of grape juice over the wax, my secret word, spy, appeared. That worked.
That worked. You can't see it on the paper until you apply the reagent.
The spy ring was so secret, not even General George Washington knew the identities of the agents. And this year on Long Island, dozens of volunteers unveiled a hand-built boat inspired by local spies. They dug up plans from the museum to create a perfect replica of a 1776 whaleboat used to ferry secret messages across the Sound.
Could you imagine rowing that to Connecticut at night with nothing, no lights, with the possibility of being chased by British privateers? And these guys did it again and again. They put everything on the line, they really did. And against all odds, they won.
The The labor of love began in 2023, meant to teach future generations how intelligence from brave patriots helped outsmart the Redcoats. A critical alliance between France and America helped turn the tide of war, and it was Connecticut that played a key role in the final military campaign that led to Britain's surrender. Tony Aiello explains.
From a field in Middlebury, Connecticut, a harvest of musket balls and regimental buttons, relics of the history made here.
You know, it's real. It's not just a story. It really happened.
Larry Janeski now owns that farmland where French troops under General Rochambeau camped in the summer of 1781 during a 680-mile march from Newport, Rhode Island to Yorktown, Virginia.
Many of them would be sacrificed for the sake of saving America.
Historian Ray Sullivan says hundreds of French troops died during the grueling march and the violent siege of Yorktown that helped Washington's army force the surrender of British troops under General Cornwallis.
Without the French, we would still be an English colony.
As Rochambeau's troops trudged across Connecticut, they stopped to camp in 11 towns, often enjoying a warm welcome.
And participated in dances and singing at each stop along the way.
Today, the Washington-Rochambeau Revolutionary Route is commemorated across Connecticut. In Newtown, this stretch of road is basically unchanged since the French marched here. In Wethersfield, the Webb House is where Washington and Rochambeau met to discuss strategy, probably in this very bedroom.
Essentially, the topic was, what do we do next? Do we go and attack the British at New York, which Washington wanted to do, or do we keep our options open?
Back in Middlebury, a new memorial to Rochambeau and the troops sent by the French king will help celebrate America 250. It shows a French soldier trudging up Middlebury's breakneck hill.
I wanted to find the guy that really made this happen. He really marched that march. There's an alliance that was formed that we should be grateful for.
After the war, Rochambeau wrote, "May the brotherhood of the soldiers of 1776 never fade, nor the stars cease to shine on the friendship of the two countries."
And did you know a flimsy piece of paper and a steely bayonet were both keys to an important win in the Battle of Stony Point? The British flag flew high above the Hudson in Rockland County until American patriots captured it in July of 1779. General Anthony Wayne devised a daring nighttime raid.
The element of surprise was absolutely essential to this battle. Wayne had all the men put a piece of white paper in the front of their hats to identify each other in the dark.
And while a handful of patriots fired muskets, most American forces snuck up on the British silently with bayonets. It took the patriots just 25 minutes to kill or capture an entire British regiment. 11 medals of courage and valor were awarded during the Revolutionary War. 3 of them went to the heroes of the Battle of Stony Point. North of that site stands West Point, considered critical to winning the war because of its location along the Hudson River. Built along a high, narrow curve of the Hudson River during the Revolution, West Point was used as a blockade against enemy ships. With its high-up vantage point, General George Washington named West Point as the most important post of the war.
Tell me about Fort Putnam.
All right, Fort Putnam is one of the most strategic positions at Fortress West Point.
Built along a high, narrow, S-shaped curve up the Hudson River during the American Revolution, West Point and its multiple forts was used as a blockade against enemy ships fighting to split the colonies.
When you come to West Point, what you'll notice is that the ground just keeps going up.
With defenses going higher and higher, this layered defense 50 miles north of New York City was named by General George Washington as the most important post of the Revolution. You can certainly see the British coming from here.
Absolutely.
And still today, a group at West Point dates back to the American Revolution, one you might not expect.
On the grounds of West Point Military Academy, hearing patriotic tunes is part of everyday life. With beats for the morning wake-up and the lunchtime salute. But back 250 years ago, military music was essential during wartime.
We were communicating battle calls across the field.
If They wanted soldiers to move forward if they wanted them to move left or right. You have a specific beat?
Yes, each a specific beat or a specific bugle call.
Even through the midst of battle, the military band continued to play. Staff Sergeant Jeff Prospery Jr. is a drummer in the oldest continually operating field music group, the Hellcats.
I'm working since George Washington established us here in 1778.
Much more to come right here on Tri-State 250, America's 250th anniversary. So there was a split in New York.
Absolutely.
Between the Patriots and the Loyalists.
It's the little-known document that divided our area. We'll tell you about the Declaration of Dependence and
they were promised so many things and were delivered nothing.
The untold story of granting enslaved people freedom here in New York. One woman's journey to find her family's history.
Just days after the signing of the Declaration of Independence, Patriot soldiers in New York tore down a 4,000-pound symbol of British control. The toppling of King George's statue became a symbolic representation of a rebellious new nation. When the news of the signing of the Declaration reached the city, it was read aloud. Fired up troops and supporters then marched to the park at Bowling Green. The piece of the statue, the horse's tail, can be found at New York Historical. There's something else you'll find at New York Historical. Everyone knows the Declaration of Independence, but did you know about the Declaration of Dependence? This is the original one-of-a-kind petition signed by 700 New Yorkers in 1776. The signers remained loyal to the King of England against what they called a strong tide of oppression and tyranny. Many of these people didn't fare well at the end of the American Revolution.
That's right. I mean, many of them left the city and settled in other places. Some people went back to Britain.
Another little-known document from that time, the Phillipsburg Proclamation. It granted thousands of enslaved people freedom. On display at Phillips Manor Hall State Historic Site in Yonkers, New York, is the proclamation announcement, which in the 1770s was signed inside this manor by a British general.
He is promising freedom to any enslaved person who could make it to British lines. Men, women, children, families. And word gets out and thousands of people run.
One of the enslaved who did escape from Brunswick, New Jersey, was 33-year-old Jupiter Farmer. His name is listed among the 3,500 who found freedom. Jupiter and thousands of others traveled by boat to Canada, and Andrea Davis now serves as the executive director of the museum built where they disembarked in Nova Scotia. And now to an 8th-generation descendant of Jupiter Farmer. Andrea Davis, you have spent years researching the journey of Jupiter and the thousands of others who made their way to freedom. What are you hoping people take from this story?
Having to share that opportunity as a descendant with the rest of the world just means so much to me. I want people to know that it may not have been, or it was omitted from history books, but I'm here to tell you about it today.
How has it affected you to learn even more about your family's history?
I always say, Mary, that they were not meant to survive, but they did, because I'm here as an 8th-generation descendant. I get to take this story and I get to share it, not only to the world, but to my own family. I'm a mother of 3 children and a grandson, and I tell them about the story of the Black Loyalists and their journeys and how they survived and their tenacity and ingenuity.
Andrea Davis, thank you for enlightening us about your family's journey to freedom.
Still ahead.
We have been connected to hundreds of places over centuries via the sea.
How the Hudson River turned New York into an economic superpower. And the revolutionary spirits are alive and well, where you can grab a drink like General George Washington. Plus,
we have one shot to live another day. We cannot let a stray gunshot give us away.
Winning over new fans years after it first took the stage. Why Hamilton is still capturing young audiences' attention.
Part of New York's beauty is its stunning backdrop along the water. From the Hudson and East Rivers to the Long Island Sound, the water's here at the heart of New York's economy. Alice Gaynor shows us that was true even 250 years ago.
In 1775, the Revolutionary War began.
Here we have this incredible reproduction of a lithograph of the ships the British
Navy ships in New York Harbor.
We took a walk on an enlarged Ratzer map at the Museum of the City of New York, named for the British military officer who made it during England's rule.
We can walk on Water Street here, down all the piers.
New York was such an important port that the British came in almost as quickly as they could to take it away from the revolutionaries, because I commanded 315 miles of Hudson River.
We are on this very important estuary that connects the rest of the world through the ocean up into the middle of the country through the Hudson.
In 1784, the Empress of China left New York and became the first American ship to connect with Asian markets.
This was really the proof of concept that global trade could be profitable, could be an economic engine for New York and the new nation.
In 1825, the Erie Canal was completed.
New York started with a geographic advantage, a deep water protected harbor with the North River, the Hudson River connecting all the way inland, and then with the Erie Canal, a connection to the heartland. So when we think about why did New York grow as the financial capital of the world? Why did it become the city known all over the world? It really comes right out of the ocean. It comes from an advantageous trading port. And around the trading port are all the other little businesses that flourish.
Today, the Port of New York and New Jersey is the third largest port in the United States.
This is the most diverse city that has ever existed in the history of humans by a huge margin. That is precisely because we have been connected to hundreds of places over centuries via the sea.
New York City, forever a maritime city.
We have much more to come right here. Stay with us.
Water, hops, and molasses. Just some of the ingredients for General Washington's beer recipe. We'll explain. And
I would definitely say that it deepened my love for history and theater.
It's the story about America's history that's touched the hearts of millions. How students are finding new connections through the 250-year-old story of Hamilton.
And 250 years ago, one intersection on Pearl Street was the epicenter of patriotic activity. The founding fathers, including General Washington, gathered there. Revolutionaries plotted against the British at Fraunces Tavern, discussing military engagements and spying activities.
Oh, we're pouring it in there.
But you can't have a good gathering without spirits, a staple in 1776. Do people often ask you for George Washington era beverages?
Oh, yeah, all of the time, yeah. All of the time. What did George used to drink? And we'd say, well, he used to drink. There was ale, beer, wine, and punch would have been available back then as well, too.
And a centuries-old recipe brought back to life. He wrote out the makings for small beer on the last page of his 1757 notebook. The recipe calls for water, bran hops, and molasses. With just 2% alcohol, it made water safe to drink.
The first line in the recipe is for boiling the mixture, so that would have killed off any of the lingering bacteria.
It's mildly refreshing, I think. And if your job was being like essentially a professional camper in the 1700s, I could see it probably be one of the better parts of your day.
Washington's notebook is part of the New York Public Library's collection. The songs, the lyrics, the performances, the Broadway hit Hamilton reignited a generation's interest in 1776. Dave Carlin shows us how its storytelling is still capturing audiences and showing them how the past is just as relevant today.
One of the most successful shows in Broadway history is winning over new fans, not in the theater, but in the classroom.
Going through the program for you, Hector, and just what part of it did you like best?
We had to look at like primary source documents, and we kind of had to see how Lin-Manuel turned these documents into the play.
The musical's history lessons are part of the Hamilton Education Program. It's a partnership between Hamilton the Musical, the nonprofit Gilder Lehrman Institute of American History, and New York City Public Schools.
I'm very grateful for it because it introduces a lot of students or people in general, even teachers who don't immerse themselves in history.
They wrote a large amount of essays, and he wrote 51. When they mentioned Common Sense by Thomas Paine, I was like, hey, we learned about this.
As part of the Hamilton education curriculum, these students saw Hamilton on Broadway. The day we sat in on the class, there were two special guests. Edred Utomi recently played Alexander Hamilton, and Jared Spector is the current King George III. As the country celebrates its 250th anniversary, these students talked about what it means to be an American.
especially coming from a place where you don't have anything, it definitely means a lot to me.
My family, they're all from Puerto Rico, and while that's still in America, coming to mainland America and having all the opportunities in New York.
I would say being in America, it definitely gives you chances to have opportunities both in school and outside of school in the future as well. You get to make something of yourself.
In May, 1,300 students also saw Hamilton. EduHam, as it is called, has welcomed thousands of students to Broadway. After the performance, members of the cast and backstage crew spoke to the students. The Hamilton Education Project, which started 10 years ago, gives students a better understanding of the Founding Fathers.
In this year of the 250th anniversary of the Declaration, this couldn't be more important. So that's why we're committed to the next 10 years, because when these kids leave high school, they become our fellow citizens.
EduHam has the full support of Hamilton creator Lin-Manuel Miranda, producer Jeffrey Seller, and author Ron Chernow. In the Bronx, Dave Carlin, CBS News New York.
That does it for us on Liberty Island. You can find all of these stories on America's 250th anytime on CBSNewYork.com. Happy Independence Day. I'm Mary Calvi, and that's the way it was.